overwhelmed to Ovation, which is, I generally start every project in the overwhelm mode and try very hard to get to Ovation. Most of the time I'm successful, but sometimes I have issues. But over the time, I've worked out kind of a process and how I can take that overwhelm and really focus it and come up with a solution design that works. So just as a starting place, a little bit about me. I am a senior solutions architect with Inneton Dolman, and I, in the Belgian office, I have 16 Salesforce certifications, and I'm on the road to CTA. So hopefully, maybe the end of next year. Thank you to my peanut gallery here. I've been in the Salesforce ecosystem for about 20 years, and I've held literally every role. I've been a user, I've been a developer, I've been an admin, I've been on the operational side, and currently architecture, which is my favorite place to be. I'm a recent transplant to Belgium. I moved here in April from the Windy City, and in Chicago, for those of you who are not familiar. And when I'm not working, I'm usually knitting in public, reading, and drinking a lot of coffee and wine. It's the best part about living here. Okay, so let's just talk about what happens when you have a new project. And I'm not going to touch them if I'm going to break it. So when you have a new project, I personally love new projects. They feel like the very first day of school. When I was a kid, I loved going to school, and the first day was my favorite day. I got to wear new clothes. Generally, I have an older sister, so the first day of school was like the only day I almost ever had to wear hand-me-downs. You have a fresh notebook, you have pencils that are just brand new, sharpened. Those of you who are American know about pink pearl erasers, my favorite. And it's, you're just ready and geared up for that first day of school. So first day of a new project feels like that for me. And so you walk in and you go to your first discovery sessions, and you just start collecting tons and tons of data. And that data isn't necessarily all connected. It's just, your users, your stakeholders are feeding you information, and you're, taking it all in and writing furiously or typing furiously, trying to think of the best questions to ask to get the information you need, and end up with a lot of data. You know what the end goal is, and you know that you've got all this information, but how do you get from that pile of data to an end project? So let's talk about that. Okay, I brought up a case study. This is a project I did a few years ago. And this is a case in point of how this process really worked for me. My client was a 15-year-old, they had a 15-year-old Salesforce org with 60 plus custom profiles and approximately 1,200 users. And they were on the verge of going to public, and they actually failed their security review as part of their due diligence, primarily because they had too many custom profiles with modify all and view all permissions added to them. What the modus operandi was for the system admins, when someone said, hey, I can't see this record, they'd just be like, oh, view all. I know, we're all kind of like, things that keep you awake at night, hashtag why I'm in strict. So the project goals were to reduce the profiles to 10 or less, to get custom profiles down to 10 or less, using an RBAC methodology. So RBAC, for those of you who aren't familiar with it, it's role-based access controls, and it really, permission sets and permission set groups are a godsend in this environment. So the project team included myself, a business analyst, and a project manager. So we did our initial discovery. We interviewed 75 users in 30 departments, across 30 departments, to really understand their usage requirements. We reviewed field level security and object security for sales, service, and CPQ, as as well as custom objects. We ended up, I pulled up my files, my analysis files, and it was over 25,000 fields across 60 profiles that we had to analyze. Also, what came out of discovery is the public sector. We realized that the public sector had, like, people could see the public sector opportunities, but there are really strict rules in the United States when you're dealing with a governmental agency about who can see the data, where that user is physically, and who should be able to see it. It's all on a need-to-know basis, and most people don't really need to know. So the first thing we did, okay, first thing I did was panic. And then step back, I took a deep breath, and then I took another, I might have taken 10. And so the first thing we did as a team is we said, okay, where are the patterns? What is, we looked at all of this information and started saying, where are the patterns? Now, when you have that much information, how do you do that? So for me, I went back to my years in college. When we wrote research papers, we would write on our ideas on index cards and sort our index cards out. Sorry. So I gotta take that deep breath again. So we wrote them all out on index cards and then just laid them out on the table and started moving them around. But use whatever tool works for you. That is definitely the best way to do it. And it's this duplicate screen thing gets me every time. Okay, so what that process is called is chunking. And first of all, shout out to Sebastian Wagner at Flow Republic. I already had this kind of methodology. I've been using it for years, but he's the one that gave me some language around it. So shout out to him. It was an excellent session where I got this information, this organizational methodology. So the first thing you do is you start chunking the data, and you start looking for those broad patterns and do those rough sorts. And one of the things that happens to me is I end up with like 40 categories, and I really need 5. And so I really, you start challenging yourself. And I think that's a really important message. It's really important to push yourself, ask yourself, is this really right? And start collapsing it. Use whatever tool you have so that you're really questioning yourself and questioning the whys. I use the 5 whys, which is what Toyota uses. The Toyota Motor Company uses when they're doing when there's solution issues that come up in their engineering process. It works really well for me as well. Why did I put in this category? And then I answer it, and then I ask myself why again, and keep going. And by the time you get to the 5th why, you really drill down to the root. Okay, so in our project, we used our index cards, we talked through them, we challenged each other, and really, as a result, we had 3 personas. They're pretty self-evident, creator, updater, and consumer of data. And then we aligned those personas across the customer journey. So I'm not going to go into the details on that, but it's, again, pretty evident, when you think about the life cycle of a customer, and then you start putting, am I creating data here? Am I looking at data here? Am I consuming it? Am I editing it? And what is my persona in relation to that? So once you've gone through that chunking process, the next thing you want to do is describe your information. So when you do that, you are really looking at the actors and the roles that they will play, what the overall business flow is, and how that comes together. And you start getting some form to your information, to your data. And again, this is another place where you really need to challenge yourself and really question, am I doing the right thing? Am I thinking about this the right way? And really focus on that. Additionally, at this point, when you're going through and challenging your thinking, also really look at what are the pros of doing it this way versus a different way? And is there a better way for me to do it? Maybe it's not the best way for me to do it, but it's the right way in the big picture. So make sure that you're taking that viewpoint. So at that point, we were able to distill it down to 11 final profiles. We really tried for 10, but we just couldn't quite get there. We mapped it out in Lucidchart and really, we're able to say, okay, if I'm in demand gen, these are the things I need to be able to do. If I'm in sales operations, here are the things I need to be able to do. And again, the same process with the field level security. It was a lot of VLOOKUPs. I'm an expert at VLOOKUPs. If anyone needs help with a VLOOKUP, reach out to me on LinkedIn. I'm happy to help. So we spent a lot of time really looking at, we took the 60 profiles, mapped them to the new 11 profiles that we resulted with, and then said, okay, what do they have now? And then we reviewed that with all of the data that we gathered and said, what really, what do they really need? And then we built that out and then reviewed that with our, reviewed it with the IT and then reviewed it with the business. And then we deployed a full sandbox for UAT. So once you get to that point where you've got your solution described and you've got a pretty good idea of what you're going to be doing, the next thing you're going to do is paint a picture. And again, this is really, it depends on who you're talking to. If I'm talking to IT, I'm going to give them a blueprint for the house. If I'm talking to the business, I'm going to give them a picture of the house, and I'm going to say, look, when you walk in the door, the first thing you're going to see is this beautiful painting. And then you're going to turn right and go into the blue room. But IT, I'm going to say, here's the electricity, here's the plumbing, here's where the sink goes, here's the fixture that's going to, when you turn it this way, hot water comes out. When you turn it that way, cold water comes out. So it really, it's use the tool, play it to your audience. And then this last one, again, this is another shout out to Sub Wagner. Make sure you can explain it to an 8-year-old. I have learned over time that if I'm not sure I have something right, I explain it to my daughter who hates technology. If you ask her what I do for a living, she's like, I don't know, nerdy stuff. So I call my daughter and say, okay, listen to me, what do you think? And she's like, what are you talking about that I know I'm not there yet? Okay, so in that explain, this is where a lot of the artifacts come out of. So again, in this project, made extensive use of Lucidchart. We did a lot of screenshots, we did some screencasts to share with the business users. We did a lot of training with them. And then, again, during the UAT process, we did really, extensive testing with them to make sure that they could do everything and see everything that they expected to be able to see and do. Very successful deployment. This project happened about 3 years ago. I spoke with the project leader about a year ago. Great feedback. They were really happy with what we built for them. So just kind of to sum it all up, it looks really simple. I know it never feels simple when you start, but it's all about just stepping back, taking that breath, chunking it, describing it, and explaining it. And once you get to that point, I think you have a successful project. So, thank you. Any questions? Yes.
So, when you were going through this huge list of fields, was there one point where you're feeling like, okay, trying to hold back and not dive into the why behind those fields and really focus? Because you're diving into so much metadata, I can only assume you found a lot more issues than what you signed up for.
Yeah, we did find a lot more and we gave them some best practice recommendations, but they weren't in the scope of the project. So we basically just left it at, here's what we think you need to do next. And they already had that scoped out, and we're working with another partner on it. So. my peanut gallery here. Thank you. Any other questions?
What does it say or do for those of us behind?
It says, you look like my record type, and then it says Jo Fan Club, because her name's JoAnn.
I brought the fan club. So anything else? Any other questions? I can see you thinking here. I can see you cogitating.
What I'm saying is that just as an architect, that you really need to be familiar with lucid charts, which is a very speedful, I really like your picture of the lucid charts, which is a very speedful, I would say, context that you can share with business people and not people. And that's really key at doing this exercise.
Yeah.
Because you will be complicated with business people, not necessarily key people in this challenge. Because the business impact is huge.
Yes, it was. And there was a lot of emotion about it because we took away, as part of it, I think there was 30 system administrators and we reduced it to 6, and those 6 were only in IT. And so there was a lot of emotion around this project.
I mean, I think the biggest challenge is actually the technical side is you know, it's just your competence. But as you as an architect, you really need that competence to speak to the business and how you expect yourself to do business. You gain that trust and confidence what you're aiming to do, right?
Yeah.
Because partially you're really definitely ultimately responsible for the outcome of the project.
Yeah. And this project was at the very beginning of COVID, so it was completely remote, and that added a whole layer as well. That was because everybody was still trying to figure out how to do that. Okay, well, thank you for joining me. I appreciate it.